Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 49 of our weekly Q&A series. If you're on YouTube, links in the description to get this on podcasting platforms. If you're on podcasting platforms only and you don't know about us on YouTube for some reason, BDCKR Gaming on YouTube, we'd appreciate a sub. Getting straight into the content this week, because I don't think we have anything particular to...
Although I have been reading about the whole kidney gate and bad art friends on Twitter.
I know nothing about that.
Yeah, I know. It's too complicated to really get into. I think if you're interested, you can find it all online, but I've been taking a deep dive, and oh boy. It's just, you know what it's like? It's like Hyperion. One of the things I loved about Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion is that Hyperion tells a story.
Yeah.
And then when you revisit it with the Fall of Hyperion, it changes your perspective on everything that happened before. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that kidney gate thing is doing exactly the same thing. And it shows us a lot about the people involved in a way that you don't when you see it originally, because it's just really flipped a lot of it. And all it really has to do with is how somebody presents a story to really lead you to interpret sort of basic facts completely differently, which is kind of neat and kind of interesting why it's so compelling.
Without context, that's so confusing. I think I have to look at that afterwards. Okay, anyways. Yeah. Our first question of the week comes from Anush Makam, and they say, sorry for asking another question, BDCKR. Don't apologize. You don't need to. No worries. I've recently discovered the reset challenge glitch. I'm on iOS, and I've been doing that for Arkham Knight Catwoman and the current challenge Blackest Night Martian Manhunter and promoting them right away. Obviously, we got to this a little bit late.
Yeah.
But I've heard that immediately promoting the characters is not wise, because you should have a few elite 2 to 3 characters to make online easier and faster to grind. For the next few challenges, should I stockpile multiple copies of the characters or promote them as soon as I get the copies?
So, like a lot of answers, it's a great question, actually.
Yeah.
But like a lot of complicated questions, the answer is often, it depends. If you want it to be, the right answer is it depends.
Yeah. The less you like a character, the less it matters what you do to them. So in general, if you play them and you go, oh, I don't love this person, I don't find them super fun, or if you, are confident that there's not going to be any synergies for them, then you can just sort of go ahead and promote them and use them for single player. The key sort of piece of information is that for online multiplayer, you do want to wait until you actually have a good handle on how you're going to be using them in online before you decide where you want them to end up. Right. And because elite levels and augments are the only two things in your control, right? That's what you want to hold off on until you know who you're going to be using.
And augments, you mean like attack and health?
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
But even crit chance and crit damage, just because
if
you're not going to use them much, you don't want to waste them.
Right. Yeah. I think the one thing that really, the fundamental premise that really informs every answer to this kind of question is that offline play, your opponent's stats are fixed. They are what they are. It doesn't matter what you do. Multiplayer, your opponent scales up to a limit.
Yeah.
And it scales up, but it starts off as similar to your team as much as possible, and then it goes as high as it can above your team.
Yeah, but not the same amount. It goes higher, a certain percentage higher, a certain proportion better stats in your team.
So you can get further in offline play just by higher stats. Mm-hmm. Higher elite level, higher levels, higher elite promotion, I should say, and higher levels. And multiplayer, you really need to have good gear when you get better to be successful.
Yeah. So really, that's the two things, is that you want to keep them at a lower elite level. First off, you don't really need to elite them past whatever's going to give you max battle points.
Well, all right, so can I just stick in one other premise, though, too?
Yeah.
Is that getting good gear takes way longer than max promoting and max leveling up the characters that you like.
Especially a challenge character.
Right.
Yeah.
So that when you go too fast in one place, it takes you longer to catch up, and then you spend a lot of time, if you're going to be playing this long term, at a disadvantage because you don't have the gears that you want because you promoted too quickly.
Yeah, so in general, get the gears that you want until you're not being outclassed by the gears and you can consistently win fights, right? Mm-hmm. In online multiplayer with the teams that you like. And then, once your gear is there, you can ratchet up your elite level, or, you know, potentially like your damage stat if you want, or your health stat if you don't like our advice.
Yeah.
To a point where you're getting either max battle points or you're right at the edge. Like at the least second fight on, you're getting max battle points.
Right.
But ideally from all the fights, right? And you can sort of dial that in. And I mean, the other consideration is if one of the members of your team is like a online multiplayer exclusive reward or something like that, then what you want to do is make it so that your team is approximately equivalent stats, or if it's unbalanced, the person who has lower stats is somebody who is a real sort of support character, whose goal is to just boost the other people and isn't meant to be a fighter themselves.
So here's another consideration too, is that because there's such a disparity between the lowest level golds and the highest level golds, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, even what people consider the worst golds, like people consider Regime Black Adam, they consider Elseworld Flash, they consider Containment or Pickle Suit Doomsday, some of the worst gold characters, they're still actually really good. And if you have too big a range, if you push some people too far, then it limits the kind of team combinations that you can have. And what would be otherwise a good, fun team to play, it doesn't work because one team member is just way more powerful compared to another, changes the kind of opponents that you face, and it can render a weaker character useless on something that it's would be really cool to play.
Yeah, we've said this before, we'll say it again. It would be so great if you could, like,
regress.
Pick their elite level, like on a slider. Like, if you unlocked it and it let you have a new one. Is because the game really works on the assumption that bigger stats are always better. Yeah. That the bigger the number, the better the guy. Yeah. But online multiplayer, which is the main sort of driving force to make people keep playing, does not operate on that same logic. So there's a bit of a mismatch there. But yeah, so in general, hold back. And the sort of safest thing to do is not put them past whatever the highest stat, the stats of whatever the highest stat team that you're currently playing online multiplayer in. Right. And winning consistently in. Because if you do it to there, as long as, you know, and I'm assuming that for this advice that you don't already have like a bunch of people all the way maxed out that you're rocking online multiplayer, because I'm assuming if you're in that position, you're not asking us for advice in the first place. But if you can sort of pick two places to fix your stats, which is either the lowest stat guy that you definitely want to use in online multiplayer, to make sure that you can make any team comp with the person that you definitely want to use, and then you can just delete everybody else that you want to use every time you get that person's stats up. And the other option is the highest stat, no higher than the highest stat team that you are consistently winning with in online multiplayer.
And I also want to answer one of the other questions there is, for the next few challenges, should I stockpile multiple copies of the character or promote them as soon as I get the copies? I think you stockpile them first. Definitely, even if you don't want to promote them now, save it for later unless you've got more than enough copies to get them past, you know, or get them to Elite 10. Because if you ever decide that you don't, or that you do want to promote them, buying
better
them,
already have it, yeah.
Yeah, because you're only getting 30% of the price back. And if I had another point, I can't even remember that now. Yeah, but just don't play with them first. Get a feel for whether you like them or not. I mean, max them out at level 50. That's no brainer because you got no control. You can't freeze them at the level, but you totally have control over promotion. And if you play them and you're really happy with them and you want to just goose them a little bit, yeah, you've got the character stockpiled. You might as well. Yeah. And then you can always make your decisions later.
Yeah. I think the only way to freeze them at a certain level would be to hack their XP over and over and over again, which doesn't seem like a particularly efficient way of doing things.
No.
So yeah, there we go. Our next question comes from Will A. And they say, hey BDCKR, my Flashpoint team is Elite 4 max damage and crit augmented. The problem is that my team is just barely under the 5k battle points threshold, so I'll have to health augment a character. I'm wondering what character do you think would benefit the most from having additional health? I think it's also worth mentioning that my gear loadout is virtually the same, but my Batman has a super pill instead of the Blade of the War God, allowing him to restore large amounts of health. And when he says the same, he means the same as in our video.
I think so. I guess so, yeah.
Or the same as what we do. And he says, P.S. The augment grind was extremely painful. Do not recommend.
Yeah. I guess it's not entirely, because we use Flashpoint Batman in a number of different teams. He's on a Justice League team, and when we do Justice League for Phantom Zone, he actually has Super Pill plus Gauntlets of Azrael, because we're willing to give up some of the basic damage in order to satisfy some of the Phantom Zone tasks.
Yeah.
So stealing health is great with Super Pill, and you double the health stolen with Gauntlets, because when you're the first person in, you're stealing health for both your teammates. It makes it real easy to finish that that task, even though you don't get the combo under every time, because you don't have to. You get it maybe 3 times in the first fight and 2 times in any fight after that, as long as you're getting the full health seal and they don't have something funny like deflecting basic attacks.
Yeah.
You're golden. You're laughing.
Mm-hmm. So the who do you health augment? We're going to kind of sidestep the question.
Like who's richer? What was that joke? There's like
Superman or Spider-Man,
and it's Batman. Batman's richer.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't health augment anybody in general. Although I guess theoretically you're not mucking with the proportions that much if you just if you health augmented anybody. Yeah. But ideally you just maybe like elite one of them.
And since Flashpoint Batman was challenge character, if he's unlocked, he would be easy to promote to Elite 5, because, you just spend some coins. Don't augment his health. If you have a choice, augment his damage.
Yeah.
I think that would be much better. So it'll still change the points you're getting. And I guess, let's go back to answer
the damage already is augmented.
Is it max augmented?
Yeah, max damage and crit augmented. So I'm assuming max crit augmented means both types of max crit. And
no, I thought it was, I interpret
crit damage and crit chance,
thought?
No, I think it's literally damage is already max augmented.
I would promote him one level and make him a little bit higher. And you know what, too? Don't bother. Elite 4, it's close enough that unless, I guess, you finish the fights fast enough, the difference in the points is so little, it's so marginal. I think it's just not even worth potentially unbalancing your team. Yeah. Making it like, here's the problem. If you go to augment their health, you're not finishing your opponents any better. You're just faster. You're just making them harder to beat. And all you're doing to make up for that is making yourself a little bit hardier. But you're still going to have to fight longer, because the fight finishes based on how much damage you do. And your damage output isn't changing.
Yeah.
That's why promotion is better, because at least there's a little bit of damage increase. Not a lot, but some.
Mm-hmm. So there we go. Our next question comes from Nombre2702, and they say, I normally don't have any questions, but I'm curious to know what you think about the DC movie universe. Also, I'd like to thank you guys for making these great videos. Keep up the amazing work. So first off, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for watching. And DC movie universe, I mean, so the thing is, we're not huge movie people, and we're not actually hugely plugged into superhero content.
I used to be so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what the DC universe used to be like in the movie industry. It used to be amazing. I remember when Superman came out, and that was the best superhero movie ever at the time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you look at it now, the special effects aren't great, but you compare that to what we could have watched before. I remember watching the original Spider-Man movie with Nicholas Hammond in it, the kid from Sound of Music. Yeah. I remember watching the Thor movie, and they were awful. Like, it was painful to watch. And I remember getting sucked into watching on TV late at night. And it fooled me every time. I'd see, the Avengers. I think, comic book Avengers. No. It was Steed and Emma Peel. It was that British show where they had those British crime fighters.
Yeah.
And then I thought, New Avengers. That maybe this is the comic. No, that was a revisiting of that Avengers TV show. And so, in the middle of the night, there's not a lot of choices. This is back before cable was widespread, and you get basically a lot of whatever you could pick up on the antenna.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a long time, and I think probably the most important thing I want to say about the DC stuff is that can change with not a lot of it. All you need are a few good movies, and it changes how people feel about the whole franchise.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's part of the problem is that we haven't seen this stuff. So I haven't seen Birds of Prey. You have.
Oh, I loved it. I really liked it. Yeah.
I haven't seen the Suicide Squad.
Is it out?
It's out, and it's supposed to be really good.
Sure. James Gunn.
Yeah. I haven't seen Justice League.
I tried watching that.
I've heard that the Wonder Woman movie was good.
The second one? Or I watched the first one. The first one was pretty good.
I haven't seen the first one.
Right, so the first one bugged me, though, and you'll understand why this bugs me, is that she was wearing mules. So there's those high heels that have the thing filled in between the foot and the heel to make it more like a shoe and more balanced, I guess. But it's still, to me, functionally, if you have any kind of warrior... This bugs me, but I'm watching Into the Badlands.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so it's a TV show. It's... I'm not even really paying attention enough to the rest of it to care, but it's got a lot of great sort of martial art scenes, and it's styled after those old Hong Kong style ones where they do like physically and physics impossible kind of feats.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. A lot of wire work.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch. It's really beautiful choreography, and I love that.
Well, the thing with those old Hong Kong style movies is that it was a mix of really physically impossible things, like wire work and whatever, and breaking physicality, and then also just stunt performers putting their body through absolutely grueling stuff. Yes. So it was really contrasted where it was like, oh, well, this is something that no human could ever do. And the next shot was actually just somebody punching somebody hard enough in the real actual face to knock the actual stunt performer out. Yeah. So I think there was that mix of stuff, whereas like, you know, a lot of Hollywood stuff is sort of the halfway point where they're trying to be a little more grounded a lot of the time, but they're also pulling their punches where it's like fantastical, but then also in some ways more real.
So this is the funny thing too, actually, because we're talking about these things that are great. If you had a few crappy movies, that would be enough to sink it too, because there's a very strong recency bias where people, you know, just because something comes out later doesn't invalidate or make the previous things worse. Yeah. But people, their feeling about the whole franchise, whether it's Marvel or DC, is absolutely affected by the most recent thing that they saw. Yeah. So I think... maybe we need to see the Suicide Squad movie because, like you, I've heard lots of great things about it. Yeah. But I think right now I'm just having trouble. I'm still having trouble consuming media. I'm trying to read more books now. Yeah. And I have something really interesting when it comes. It's coming out very soon that I want to read really quickly and then maybe drop a review here because I expect it to be really good. All right, spoiler alert. It's Fonda Lee's Greenbone Saga, and it's basically fantasy, gangster, kung fu, Asian inspired, superpower. Like it's all these things that I really like, and it's well done. Like I guess that goes without saying too. But a lot of times when people talk about the influences of something, it has to be a minimum threshold of quality story. And so it has that, but then when you add on that little sprinkle of extra flavor of all that stuff, it makes it real cool. And the third book, the final book in the trilogy is coming out in a month, less than a month, I think. Yeah, and I'm not consuming a lot of media too. You know, the only movie that I watched recently, I watched Parasite recently, finally. Oh, did you? I did, yeah. What'd you think? It was good. I liked it. It was weird, but in a very good way. It was very well done. Yeah, so we were having a conversation recently about this, about how I wonder, I don't watch enough Korean media to get a sense of whether this is just what gets popular in Korean media or this is what's being selected out to present to North American audiences. Yeah. Yeah, and so the conversation, right, we talked about how there's K-dramas that are pretty popular. And I mean, like, just in terms of Korean, like, fiction, I don't know what it is that's making it, but there's a huge amount of stuff that you were talking about is dealing with class, right? Specifically, and I mean a lot of our reference for Korean media is like a lot of what's his name? Specific Bong Joon-ho. Specific, I don't know that specific director. The guy who directed Parasite, right. and I think he did. It was called The Host. I wish I'd looked this up before he started filming. But that it seems like there's a lot of the failed young man kind of starting points, right? So the unsuccessful dad in Parasite, and again, if it's not that movie, if it's not the host, then I'm really messing it up.
Yeah, it is Bong Joon-ho. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced.
And we were watching Squid Game.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah, and in terms of like other stuff that I'm watching like little, shows here and there as like breaks in between studying that aren't nearly as substantial, like watching The Circle, which is that Netflix reality show that's about social media.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
You get they put a bunch of people in an apartment, they're not allowed to meet each other face to face, and they interact through chats.
Okay.
And it's funny because it's not played this way, but when you take like half a step back, it feels almost a little like dystopian. Because they're in these apartments that have been decorated for them.
Right.
And they're speaking directly there's like screens in most rooms, and like information will pop up on the screens, or the chats will pop up on the screens, and they're speaking directly to like a person who transcribes it, but we never hear the interaction with the person, so it's just them speaking like they're speaking to like a Google Home Assistant or an Alexa or Siri or something, and like sending messages and stuff, and then it's like a popularity contest where people rank each other, and then the top ranked people become influencers and get to vote people out. So it's this weird, living under, like, surveillance, like...
So it feels like, the way you're describing feels like they're grabbing sort of the worst parts of social media.
It's weird. So it's kind of fun. It's like it's a light watch. It's not meant to be like that, but it is weird because like that's the thing is that there's no crew and the first season happened before the pandemic.
Wait, what do you mean there's no crew? Is it all automated? Like these are all surveillance cameras that they're getting footage from?
So it's not surveillance cameras, but what it is that there's no like there's no other people. The idea is that you only ever see these people alone in their own apartments talking to these screens, and obviously somebody's transcribing it for them. And I think their interaction with like staff is probably way more frequent than we see, right? Because I'm sure that like the back and forth. Because when they like talk, they say like the message, and then like the message, we see it as like a 10-second process where they say it and then the message pops up and then it sends. But I'm sure they do a back and forth with an actual person going, is this what you wanted? Is this a spelling, right? Or something. Yeah. Whether or not they like pump somebody in. And so all the cameras that are filming them are like, they are like security style cameras that just have, that are being like remotely controlled by somebody to frame it up and everything. So it is like, it's weird.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because it occurs to me now that have you haven't been watching the last few seasons of Survivor?
No.
So I've been watching that and I've watched every season and some of it sticks stronger in my brain than others. But what's weird about this season, for all the other things that they're trying to do, because they always have to jazz it up a little bit, make it a little bit more exciting. The interesting thing that they haven't filmed, but they're doing differently, is that really letting you some of the shots. Yeah. The camera crew.
And the cameraman,
Yeah, but it's weird to me because it's a sort of facade that they, up until now, they've never really broken. They might have medical staff coming or Jeff Probst, but to see the actual stuff, it's a little bit jarring.
It was like in The Office. Right towards the end of The Office, when they made the crew close to characters, and they made the thing that they were doing, the mockumentary, was actually like a piece of media that existed in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And that is an interesting thing that happens a lot with YouTube. I mean, there was that really good, I think Lindsay Ellis video on manufactured authenticity, looking at it through the lens of baking and looking at how there was like different baking channels. I mean, this is going to be a really brief summary of a much better video, so I'll go like look up Lindsay Ellis manufactured authenticity. But how like there was one like organic YouTube channel where this woman like grew her baking channel and then had like producers and staff and started talking to them more, and then the pattern became part of it. And then there was this like
Rhett and Link.
Yeah, exactly like Rhett and Link and that type of stuff. I mean, people like that. People like knowing the crew and how it sort of naturally spreads out into everybody being a character on the show, right? Where you see more of the behind the scenes. And then there was one other sort of like AstroTurf. I think it was called like Man About Cake or something, where the whole thing shtick was that it was all men doing it. And the thing is that they had the same staff dynamic thing, but it was professionally done. They were like contracted out for it, and all of the crew were mic'd up from the first episode.
Right.
They were specifically mic'd up, so it was like really sort of purposeful, and that sort of dynamic was done on purpose. So it's really interesting, the idea of trying to make things authentic and what sort of balance you strike with them. Right. So that sounds like for Survivor that they're more willing to show you the actual process of it. And that's, I think, one of the things that Bo Burnham's Inside really was exploring is the idea of authenticity and what it shows to you and what it doesn't show to you, and how it makes you feel to be able to see, you know, behind the curtain more.
And I don't want to overstate it, because it's not like any of this, the crew members talk or anything. It's just that some of the establishing shots where they're coming at it from a distance, you see the crew in the shot. They're not talking to anybody now any more than they were before, but it's just that it's,
but they're there.
They're there.
They're a presence that wasn't there before.
Right.
And I guess it's portrayed very differently when you see like a small group of people like struggling on an island by themselves, or a small group of people, and then a person holding a camera half the size of themselves, like pointing a camera at them. Right. Like those are very different experiences. You sort of understand their positioning as not just people doing a thing, but people being watched.
But I feel like so the example you brought up with The Office, I feel like it was almost inevitable if they were going to end it the way they wanted to, because and again, I don't remember when The Office started, but it feels like that The Office was one of the first shows that was really leaning into this whole cinema verite thing, where they're doing a mockumentary. And if they're going to transition to the point where they were going to end it to say, all right, the mockumentary is over, then they would have to come into it as characters, because then there would be the response to, well, the stuff that they put together and how they were feeling about looking at stuff that they'd experienced themselves in a different way.
Well, they don't have to. This is something really interesting, and I don't know if we talked about this on the show before, on the podcast before, but we've talked about it in general. Modern Family is also mockumentary style. Yes. But it does not lean into it at all. Yeah. When I first said that to you, you had to think about whether or not that was true.
Yeah, because it totally is.
And so the interest, I don't think it's supposed to be obvious that it is. I think it's following in the footsteps of those, cutaway mockumentary things. But that's the really interesting thing, is because they never bring any form of attention to it, and it goes on for a really long time, just like The Office, a lot of seasons, and it ends. And it ends without them ever bringing any attention to this, assumed fact that
I find that
there's
less
cameras
satisfying.
and people there. Oh no, I do too. That's why what they did with Modern Family is really weird. Because I don't know. I mean, if you're listening right now and you've watched the show,
spoiler! Sorry. I guess how many years has it been over?
No, I mean Modern Family. I'm not spoiling Modern Family, and you're also not spoiling The Office.
Well, they don't. I guess not. Yeah.
And they don't bring attention to it versus they bring attention to it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a big spoiler. I mean, it's like a thematic point. It's not like a plot point.
But it is obvious that they do that, because they have those moments where they're talking to the camera, like somebody's asked them a question.
Yeah, they do, but they never ever bring attention. They never address the fact that that's what they're doing. Yeah. So I want to know if anybody's watching, they've seen Modern Family, if it occurred to them that what they were watching was mockumentary style, what they were doing was fundamentally Tide style, or if they were just felt like they were watching a show.
I feel like that because once it's been done, it changes how you feel about that kind of stuff when you see it. So, if I felt like The Office had already done that completely, so the fact that was a style of Modern Family didn't occur to me that they needed to finish the same way.
It was the thing is, it's an established thing. Mockumentary as a style has been popular enough with a huge amount of shows. Parks and Rec, The Office, Modern Family. I don't think.
This is Spinal Tap, not a show, but a movie.
Yeah, is Brooklyn Nine-Nine one? I don't think it is. No. I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine is not one specifically. Yeah, but that's the thing, is like I'm trying to think of it, and to me, other than The Office as a really, really clear one, it's not even clear which pieces of media would be and wouldn't be, right?
Right.
I'm sure I've watched more things that are mockumentaries without thinking about them.
Yeah, because Leslie Knope's, as I'm picturing it, Leslie Knope has talked to the camera a few times, like she's answering questions. Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, it's absolutely mockumentary style. But would you have picked it out if I asked you what mockumentary?
I would have had to think about it first. Like, it doesn't, in my mind, I don't characterize it that way, because it just seems. So here's an example. Do you remember Streets of Fire?
No, not at all.
So Streets of Fire the tagline was a rock and roll fable.
Yeah.
And at the time, I mean, it didn't get a lot of, it wasn't very popular. Although I remember when I saw an ad for it in another movie I'd seen before it came out, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so good. This looks so great.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see it in theaters because it was rated R.
Mm-hmm.
But, hey kids, back then, some movies you had to be at least 18 to watch, at least in Canada. So, but apparently I'm reading about it now. Mm-hmm. Some of the things visually they did for, say, the opening credits and stuff, apparently was, what's the word I'm looking for? It was just brand new. Like it was totally, nobody done that before. And since then, everybody's been copying, so that if you go back and watch it, you don't realize what the significance of it was.
Yeah.
And it's a good movie. To me, it's a good movie. It's a cult kind of movie. Great soundtrack. Diane Lane was amazing in it.
Yeah.
But it's just that, I guess, without knowing that kind of stuff, sometimes you can't appreciate it the same way for what it did.
Yeah, you need to place it in the context of everything that was happening at the same time to know what it means when they did X, Y, or Z.
And I think that it's amazing, though, that The Office has held up so well, because part of what they did was popularize that mockumentary style. Yeah. But that it still holds up, even though there's a lot of sitcoms that have done that. They still had so much other stuff in it that was really funny and fresh. Yeah. That it holds up really well on a rewatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's the interesting thing about mockumentary as a style now, is that it asks much less of the show to make it mockumentary, right? I think with The Office, and I mean with The Office, they kind of had it fade to the background before bringing it back very consciously too.
Well,
it did.
I'll let me point out Jim. All those times
where he looks at the camera,
where he looks, and that's throughout. They never give up on that. There's always moments on that. Yeah, and there's especially even later on, every once in a while, they do these things where it gives you like a camera angle or a camera cut that makes you very aware that there's somebody looking in and watching, like whether it's through a window and then they get to close the blinds, or whether it's, you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff. So they always remind you, even if it may not be like
as
at the
in
end,
your face,
right, as in your face, where it was right in the last season, where you know, hey, it's the show is coming out, we're putting it together, it's going to be released. I feel like that there's always that little element so that you never really forget that you're sort of a voyeur watching. Yeah.
So that is something kind of interesting. But yeah, so anyways, with The Circle, it feels like they're almost really purposefully trying to not do that. You don't see interaction with the producers. They'll have like games or something. They'll have stuff where they give them like costumes or other things sometimes. Yeah. And they'll just say, go to your door now, and it's there. And the sort of perception that you're supposed to get, or not necessarily perception, but there's this, they set it up almost like it's some sort of automated space where things just happen, and you're just in this like empty hotel where there's been a couple of rooms that have been outfitted for you, and you're totally sort of by yourself and isolated. And they don't play up the isolation component at all, is the really interesting thing. Is that they're all messaging each other. And I've seen like an interview or whatever where they do get like phones or internet, or like they can watch like Netflix, and they have downtime out the show.
I have the show.
Like what side of being filmed, right? Because they have to be there and they have to be by themselves, but they're apparently, or like they can't interact with any of the other contestants directly. Because part of the other point is, and this is something that's always been very confusing to me, is so people can go in not as themselves, they can catfish. And so that's sort of one of the other twists where like, oh, it's the internet, you never know who's behind the screen, right? And there's two things about catfish that confuse me. And one is that nobody has ever been docked points for being who they are and being true to themselves. And I understand reasons why people might be anxious about going on to the show as themselves, or think that they might do better as somebody else. There was one person in the first season who was a lesbian, and
pretend not to be.
Yeah, who was a lesbian and acted in a way that would be traditionally considered masculine, right? Right. And so she came in and I think she played as a dude, I don't remember. And she was just like, it's hard to be myself. I come into spaces, a lot of times I don't feel accepted, whatever. Right. And I understand the sort of internal logic, and I'm not saying like, oh, you're ridiculous, right? I'm not trying to tell that person. But there's queer people in every season. people tend to be very accepting. People will, and I've never seen anybody, like, just practically on the show, be who they are and get docked points for, like, especially, like, an aspect of their identity, right?
Right.
And if it's a personality thing, I mean, you can just, act differently, but have your facts be yourself. And the other thing that I find really confusing, so I'm confused why people would choose to be catfishes in the first place, because it doesn't usually seem to help their strategy all that much.
Mm-hmm.
Although I guess if you're, like, pretending to be, like, a hot girl or something, maybe you think that you can make alliances easier with dudes, right?
Right,
or whatever. Right? But the second thing that I find always very confusing is people seem really, really invested in finding out exactly who's a catfish and voting those people out like it matters at all.
Right.
Because at the same time, it's just, it's about alliances, it's about your connections.
Oh, so
why do you care?
That dovetailed really nicely with how Survivor used to be played.
Yeah.
Where people cared when, that people weren't being honest with them, or that they were focusing on certain things, or that they were using them. And I feel like everybody's playing that to some extent. And it always amazed me and surprised me that people, until the last few seasons, or just later in the life cycle of Survivor, they didn't focus on it and say, hey, listen, I was dishonest. There was... It's
trying to win $1 million.
Yeah, and people are leaning into that a little bit more now, way more than they used to. But it always surprised me in the first few seasons that they didn't just get into that right away, saying, "Hey, we were in the same boat. We were trying to do the same thing, and that's okay." And people would just take it very personally.
Yeah, and so I understand if you're building this really strong connection and somebody's telling you all this personal stuff and it all turns out to be a lie. And I understand more, I guess, too, if you're flirting with somebody, right? If you're starting this sort of
showmance?
If you're starting this sort of what you think is to be a romantic relationship with this, like, girl, and then it turns out to be some dude that you've never met before, or like, they're playing a straight, but they're actually an entirely different person and a lesbian, right? Or something like that. Like, I can understand why you might feel a little...
betrayed?
Well, a little like you're losing a friend. A little like you're losing somebody because they're like, oh, well, I'm lying about this, and I'm not who I say I are. And especially if you have this really strong emotional connection and you bonded like that, and you go, well, was that true, or are you lying to my face? But on this second hand, is a lot of people seem really sort of intrinsically motivated in finding and voting out catfish.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be close. It's somebody that you don't like, and you go, I think they're a catfish. We should vote them out. And then everybody goes, oh man, they're a catfish? I don't know. Maybe I don't like them so much anymore. Right. And I go, why do you care?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and just because somebody's profile picture is different, just because whatever, that's just like one layer. I mean, everybody's probably to some extent lying to you for the game.
They're not a lot of times people take pictures that have been shot in, like, professionally. Right?
But,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's degrees, I think, sometimes.
No, but real picture not, people are having a different personality, or they're nice to your face but not nice to your back, or, whatever, they're tugging at your heartstrings a little more, whatever, right? They're putting forth a version of themselves. And it's so weird to me that everyone feels really... The second it's like people think it's likely that somebody's a catfish, everybody, including people that they were potentially in an alliance with, seemed really on side to vote them out. Right. And it wasn't until this most recent season where one person was like, people were like, is this person a catfish? And they, not in their messages to the chat, but in the room, they'd be a catfish. I don't care. Yeah. They're in my corner either way. And I just don't understand why everybody it seems like people are so intrinsically motivated in, like, oh, well, they aren't who this picture is. And then totally will, like, sandbag, like, team, just to...
What does sandbag mean in that
I don't know, just
context?
Screw them over, just like,
Is that what sandbagging is?
I don't know what sandbagging is.
Alright, so, because sandbagging was when you flood, and then sandbagging is, to me, it's like a protective kind of barrier. So, I don't know what that... Is there another meaning for it? I'm clearly not in the know.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. To treat unfairly or harshly, to coerce by crude means...
Oh, so it's because to me that's the connotation has to do with, or the association I have in my mind, it has to do with flooding. So it's interesting that it has this whole different...
To conceal or misrepresent one's true position, potential, or intent, especially in order to gain an advantage over somebody. That makes sense.
Okay. All right,
so,
there you go.
I don't know. Yeah, so that's why it strikes me as so weird. There's a lot of stuff about shows. There's a lot of artifice that goes into producing that type of media. And I think... If the more you think about it, the more it makes you ask weird questions, and so that's why I find the circle so interesting and weird in the way that it presents stuff, because it seems like it's really interested in presenting this specific, like, oh, you're interacting with the circle, which is like a home assistant type thing. You're in an apartment by yourself, whatever. You're interacting with people only through social media. And that sounds like a really good setup for like a psychological horror. Right? And it's played as a really light, fun reality TV show. And they could totally, you know, do things differently. They don't have to play it up the way that they do. But it's it's all the individual elements feel like they should sum to something very different. Right? Where you're in your home alone, your only contact with the outside world is messaging people. And even when you're not sure if they're lying to you or if they are who they say they are, and you're, you know, backstabbing people for $100,000 and you're trying to, you know, find these alliances. Yeah.
It feels like this is the way you torture people and get them to tell you stuff that they want to keep secret.
And like, I think the circle controls the lights in the bedroom. So I think they wake you up in the morning with the lights on and like turn the lights out, because we see people like flopping into bed and then they turn the lights out. And then we see they have like night cameras, right? There's night vision. So
Big Brother did that.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention too was, when what were you talking about earlier that had to do with the way keeping people on and stuff, and who controlled the cameras and whether there was anybody in the first few seasons of Big Brother? You know what they did?
What?
They let you watch the rooms.
Oh, like 24/7.
24/7. Yeah. So, and a lot of whether people stayed or went was determined by viewers, and I can't remember how it happened. So one of the strategies that one of the women tried was to walk around topless all the time. So it would get edited out of the primetime highlights. Yeah. But they were doing that in a bid to become more popular, so that people would be watching and not want to vote her out.
That's terrible.
It's definitely
it's smart.
Weird. Yeah. It was strategy. She didn't win.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting strategy to try to, you know, take advantage of the circumstances. And it's funny how all these shows have evolved over time, where they're, you know, if we saw them the way they are now for the first time, it would probably seem more weird. And you look at Survivor now, right? In the first season, people would vote them out. Well, I don't know why I voted them out. Yeah. I just did it, you know, whatever.
Feel it. And now
alphabetically.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the circle I actually quite like for all that it does. We're gonna stop in just a minute here.
Yeah.
But I'll give one contrasting perspective of a show that I think is actually quite bad.
Okay.
It's very watchable, but it's kind of a miserable show, which is Too Hot to Handle.
Don't know.
So they get a bunch of attractive people. They stick them on, like, an island in, like, the Bahamas or something. They stick them on Turks and Caicos, maybe.
Okay.
Like a Turks and Caicos island. And they think they're going on some party show. And then when they show up, they go, surprise, you're not allowed to be physically intimate with each other. This is a game show. There is a group prize fund. And every time you kiss or do anything more explicit than kissing, we're going to deduct money from the prize fund, and you're going to be publicly shamed for it. And it's set up, and it's also set up, there's this, the framing device is the artificial intelligence Lana, who is trying to make them have deeper connections with each other. And it is, I'm going to argue that it's trashy. And there's a certain type of trashy reality TV, which is just like, you know, just like watching, which is what the Too Hot to Handle is going to pretend it's not, which is just like one party, uninhibited.
Yeah.
But what Too Hot to Handle does, in my mind, is to just put a layer of sneering condescension and moral superiority on top of it, where they go, you guys suck, you can't have real human connection, you're not allowed to kiss each other anymore, because you guys have relationships like bad, irresponsible people. And then the other thing too, with both the circle and Too Hot to Handle, is they just make up whatever rules they want. You know, until the end of the first season. I mean, they didn't even think they were signing up for the show. So they got into it. And then apparently, I didn't even watch the first season. I only watched the second season of Too Hot to Handle. At the end of the first season, apparently, like, it was everybody, like, split the prize fund or something. And they didn't, and then in the second season, people thought they were going to do the same thing. And then partway through, they're like, we're not going to split the prize fund. And it's like, and then they'll lose money for kissing or doing whatever. And then Lana will be like, I'll give you a challenge and I'll put all the money back if you can do this. Right. And then they're like, well, I'm going to kick you out because you're not like respecting the process. And it's totally nonsensical and random. Right. And so it just feels like you're just dangling, you're just yanking these people around. And I think it's miserable because I think if you like that type of show of just like attractive people being uninhibited or whatever, that's fine. It's not my type of thing. I don't find there to be a lot there for me to sink my teeth into or enjoy it all, but that's fine. But what I really don't like about Too Hot to Handle is the way that they are essentially providing that same kind of entertainment, because it's just hot people, you know, and they make out, they break the rules, they do whatever.
They lose money.
Yeah, they lose money. And so it's the exact same kind of show, except on top of it, you put that layer of, I'm better than you, and all the people who are watching the show are better than you, and what you need to do is learn how to settle down and be responsible. Because who cares if they want to live that way, right? They try to portray all these people like they're incapable of having real connections and relationships, and they try to portray these people as being successful in this way, but kind of sad or underdeveloped, right? They're hot and they can get all the people, but they do all these ploys that make it feel like they're supposed to be making us who are sitting at home as these average looking schlubs feel better about ourselves and go, yeah, well, I can have a real actual relationship. And it's this really weird, like fast, like watching these people like lab rats and going, I'm better than this person. I could not kiss somebody if I was put on an island and told it cost $5,000 every time I kiss somebody.
I know we're going too long, and I promise not to keep on saying this, but when you started talking about that, where you show make displays of physical affection would cost you money.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought of was, you know, like those people who lay money on the table when they go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And this might be apocryphal.
Oh, the tip.
And they say the tip. Yeah. And so every time you make a mistake, I'm going to take money off the tip, or anytime you do it. And I thought, well, that's not really the same, but it feels, you know, that superficially. Yeah. And then you kept on talking. I thought, oh, it intersects again where there's the condescension, where it's dehumanizing. Yeah. And I thought, holy crap, there's actually a more of a connection there than I thought.
Yeah.
Where it feels like it's two sort of aspects of a very similar thing.
Yeah, and so then later they put bracelets on them in the second season that turn green if they think that they're making a real connection, and it lets them kiss.
Right.
Without losing money. And it's just it's terrible. And they frame it like it's this AI, and it's like, oh, I've done computations and whatever. Right. And all the people in the show, and I think they, you know, to some extent the producers probably force them to play along.
Right.
Where they're like, oh, Lana says I can't do this, and it's like, oh, I think I'm working on building up the connections. And they make them like tattle on each other. Not like tattle on each other, but they'll be like, oh, this was how many rule violations there were. This is how many people lost money.
Like 1984.
And then they're all looking at each other. They're going like, who did it? And like people were like, oh, like they like kissed or did whatever. They like grinded up against each other. And there was like one person at the circle and one of the things who was like, you don't have a real connection. This isn't a real thing. This is just physical for you. And there's so many layers of like, I'm presuming to know what's best for you. And they're taking these people, you know, right, who are living their lives. It's different if they all came in and they go, I have a sex addiction.
Right.
If they came in and they go, I'm, you know, unhappy with how I'm living my life right now.
Right.
Right. I have really hard time controlling it, but I don't want to be this way.
Right.
Right. And if that was the case, I feel like it would be unfair to make a spectacle of them for the purposes of entertainment.
Right.
And watch them, you know, fail. But it would be really different if you brought these people in and said, and they were in some way motivated and on the same page, but they just bring these people in and go, don't kissy, or I'm gonna take all your money away.
Right.
And you thought this was gonna be fun, but I'm just gonna make you really frustrated. I'm gonna tell you that and the other thing is too, you can have a physical and emotional connection with people. There's a lot of layers where it's frustrating. So, you know, I think the Circle and Too Hot to Handle do something very similar, where you're mediating your connection through technology. It's this sort of presumed like powerful like third party entity, right? And the way that it's set up, and so that for all that the Circle does weird, I think it ends up being fun and lighthearted because it's not mean to the people on it. Right. And I think for both of these shows, though, what I find in common is I find almost as much to enjoy thinking about how they've set it up and what they're asking you as the audience member to
how you're complicit
believe and think about
process.
It and whatever else. Yeah. And so I think, you know, I've said a lot of stuff about that might make you think the Circle is weird or not very good or like off in some way.
Right.
But for all it is, it does a pretty good job. And then there's a lot of shows like Too Hot to Handle where I just think it's so mean. I think it's really fundamentally unkind to the people that it puts on the show.
Right.
And it asks you as the audience to look down on them in a way that I was really not comfortable with, because it's totally framed in a way of like, bad kissy boys get put in the punishment box, right? Like, and then everybody points and goes, "Don't do that. It's not good."
Right.
And it's so demeaning, I think.
Right.
Like, just inherently.
Okay.
Anyways.
And on that note, I don't think we're going to do another question. We've got a few more we'll save for next week.
Yeah, so that's it for this week. Quick shout out to Eliza Cat Connoisseur Caton. I kind of phoned this one in. I didn't have normally I look through our conversations and I try to find something funny that one of us has said recently or pull something like that, or some new thing that's going on. I've been busy recently. We haven't talked very much in the last week, so I didn't have anything new. Right. Just a couple messages back and forth. So they can't all be winners. She likes cats a lot. She sent me videos of her cat. I sent her a picture of my cat. So,
Very good.
Sometimes you gotta just keep it simple. And we'd also like to give a huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
And that would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.